Good morning. Yesterday we looked at the poem Elegy written in a country churchyard by Thomas Gray, and we heard the paraphrase of the first 7 stanzas from line 1 to line 28. Today we will start at line 29, stanza number 8. I will begin by reading the text, line 29 to line 32. Let not ambition mock their useful toil, their homely joys and destiny obscure, nor grandeur hear with a disdainful smile the short and simple annals of the poor. Unquote. The next 4 stanzas caution those who are wealthy and powerful not to look down on the poor. These lines warn the reader not to slight the obscure destiny of the poor, the fact that they will never be famous or have long histories or annals written about them. Let not ambitious people, the poet is trying to say, look down with contempt and ridicule upon their useful labors, their simple and homely joys, and the humble lives of these villagers. Let not people who are grand and majestic hear with a contemptuous smile the brief and simple life history of these poor men. Stanza 9, lines 33 to 36. I quote the text first. The boast of heraldry, the pomp and power, and all that beauty, all that wealth ever gave, awaits alike the inevitable hour, the paths of glory led but to the grave. Unquote. This stanza invokes the idea of a memento mori. Literally, it means a reminder of mortality. The speaker reminds the reader that regardless of social position, beauty, or wealth, all must eventually die. Death, he means to say, does not make any distinction between the high and the low. Death is an unavoidable event in every man's life. Death waits even for those who are proud of their noble birth, for those who make a display of their power and influence, and for those who are proud of their beauty and wealth and enjoy certain special privileges for these reasons. Death comes to all, and so the poet concludes that all paths, however glorious, lead only to the grave. Stanza 10, lines 37 to 40. Nor you, ye proud, impute to these the fault, if memory over their tomb no trophies raise, where through the long drawn aisle and fretted vault the pealing anthem swells the note of praise. Unquote. The speaker also challenges the reader not to look down on the poor for having modest, simple graves. He suggests, however, that the elaborate memorials that adorn the graves of the proud are somehow excessive, meaning too much, too grand. In this context, the word fretted in line 39 has a double meaning. On the one hand, it can refer to the design of a cathedral ceiling. On the other hand, it can suggest that there is something fretful or troublesome about the extravagant memorials of the wealthy. The poet here advises the proud people not to find fault with those poor people if no monument has been erected in their memory over their grave in the churchyard, where the loud and solemn sound of the songs sung by the choir. The choir is the group of singers who sing in the church in praise of the departed, rises high through long passages and the arched, ornamented roofs. Stanza 11, lines 41 to 44. The text is: can storied urn or animated bust back to its mansion call the fleeting breath? Can honor's voice provoke the silent dust, or flattery soothe the dull cold ear of death? The speaker observes that nothing can bring the dead back to life, and that all the advantages that the wealthy had in life are useless in the face of death. Neither elaborate funeral monuments nor impressive honors can restore life, nor can flattery in some way be used to change the mind of death. Note here Gray's use of personification in characterizing both flattery and death, as though death has a will or mind of its own. The poet questions, can any urn or vase with the history of the departed inscribed on it, or his lifelike statue, bring back to the body the breath of life that has fled from it? No, this is not possible. Similarly, speeches delivered in honor of a dead man cannot call him back to life from the silence of his grave, nor can flattering speeches please the cold and insensible ears of a man when he is dead. Hence, they are useless. Stanza 12. I quote the text. This is from line 49 to 52. Perhaps in this neglected spot is laid some heart once pregnant with celestial fire, hands that the rod of empire might have swayed, or waked to ecstasy the living lyre. Unquote. The poor were never able to fulfill their political and artistic potential. However, because they were uneducated, they never received the knowledge that would enable them to rule and to create. Instead, penury or poverty froze the genial current of their soul. That is, poverty paralyzed their ability to draw upon their innermost passions, the very passions that could have inspired them to become great poets or politicians. Perhaps in this unknown and uncared for churchyard, someone is buried whose heart was once charged with heavenly inspiration. Perhaps there is also buried someone who would have wielded the sphere of sovereignty in his hands, or someone who would have played upon the lyre with such a masterly skill that he would have melted the hearts of all with deep joy. Stanza 13, lines 53 to 56. This is stanza 14, lines 53 to 56. And I read the text. Full many a gem of purest ray serene, the dark unfathomed caves of ocean bear. Full many a flower is born to blush unseen and waste its sweetness on the desert air. In a series of analogies, meaning comparisons, Gray observes that the talents of the poor are like a gem hidden in the ocean or a flower blooming in the desert. Just as an unseen flower in the desert is a waste, Gray suggests the uneducated talents of the poor are also a waste because they remain unused and undeveloped. In the dark and immeasurable depths of the ocean, there are many gems which are the brightest and purest. Also, there are many flowers which grow and blossom in the desert, where they diffuse their sweet fragrance unnoticed and uninvolved by anyone, and unloved, by anyone. So also those humble people with great capacities died unknown in obscurity for want of suitable opportunity. Stanza 15, lines 57 to 60. The text goes like this. Some village Hampton that with dauntless breast the little tyrant of his fields withstood. Some mute inglorious Milton here may rest, some Cromwell, guiltless of his country's blood. The speaker then compares these poor, uneducated people to three of the most famous and powerful people of the previous century. John Hampton, a parliamentary leader who defended the people against the abuses of Charles I. John Milton, the great poet who wrote Paradise Lost and who also opposed Charles I. And Oliver Cromwell, Lord Protector of England from 1653 to 1658. The speaker suggests that buried in this churchyard might be someone who, like Hampden, Milton, or Cromwell, had the innate ability to oppose tyranny, but never had the opportunity to exercise that ability. Some of these obscure, humble people might have been a man who fearlessly resisted the tyranny of his landlord with the same courage and determination as Hampden showed in opposing Charles I, the tyrant of his country. There might also have been someone who had the poetic genius of Milton, but who, for want of opportunity for giving expression to his poetic talent, could not achieve this glory. Or there might have been someone who was as great a statesman as Cromwell, but who, owing to the circumstances in which he was placed, could not achieve greatness, and so also remained, fortunately, innocent of the guilt of shedding the blood of his countrymen. Stanza 16, lines 61 to 64. First, the text. The applause of listening senates to command, the threads of pain and ruin to despise, to scatter plenty over a smiling land and read the history in a nation's eyes. This person, the speaker reasons, with the proper education and resources might have commanded the government as well as any great leader. Note, however, that Gray gives us two ways in which to consider this power. On the one hand, a great ruler can receive applause and can ignore threats of pain and ruin. A great leader can scatter plenty, can offer prosperity to a grateful nation. But on the other hand, if one governs, one is in fact exposed to dangerous threats. And simply governing to receive applause suggests a shallow and self-serving motive. Moreover, scattering plenty implies that the wealth of a nation can be squandered by its rulers. Squandered means wasted away, spent on oneself, not used or utilized usefully or sensibly. Gray may be suggesting that having power is not as desirable as it seems. Note that the final line of the stanza is enjambed. It continues into the following line, and in this case, the next stanza. The conditions of their life did not allow them any opportunity to become great orators and capture the attention of the members of the parliament by the display of their gift of eloquence and to display their patriotism and courage by showing their disregard of danger and destruction in the service of their country. They also did not get any opportunity for making their country happy and prosperous and to see in the contented look of the nation the record of their glorious acts. Stanza 17, lines 65 to 68. I'll quote the text. Their lot forbade, nor circumscribed alone their growing virtues, but their crimes confined, forbade to wade through slaughter to a throne, and shut the gates of mercy on mankind. The first line of the stanza continues, as I just said, the thought of the previous enjambed line. It abruptly reminds us that the impoverished conditions of the poor forbade them from becoming great rulers. Gray underscores the abrupt shock of this idea by abruptly interrupting the flow of the line with a caesura. That is, in the middle, the line ends, the thought ends. Building on the idea of the previous stanza, the speaker notes that if poverty prevented the country laborers from acquiring the virtues of great and powerful people, it also prevented them from committing the crimes often associated with those people. And especially with those people who hold political power in particular, it prevented them from engaging in the bloody activity associated with the British Civil War. However, the poet finds one consolation. It is not their noble qualities alone. It is not their noble qualities alone that were limited by their poverty, but they were also prevented from committing crimes. Their conditions of life also prevented them from ascending the throne by a series of murders and from turning a deaf ear to the appeals for mercy from the suffering of mankind. Stanza 18, line 69 to 72. The text: the struggling pangs of conscious truth to hide, to quench the blushes of ingenious shame, or heap the shrine of luxury and pride with incense kindled at the muse's flame. Unquote. Because these farm laborers were not in positions of power, the speaker reasons they never had to ignore their own consciences, nor did they sacrifice their artistic talents, that is the gift of the muse, to luxury or pride. The circumstances of their life also prevented them from concealing the pangs of truth of which they were conscious and which was trying to assert itself in their own minds. They did not learn the art of concealing the crimson glow of natural modesty, nor did they ever flatter the luxurious and the proud by writing poems in their praise. Stanza 19, line 73 to 76. The text: far from the madding crowd's ignoble strife, their sober wishes never learned to stray. Along the cool sequestered vale of life, they kept the noiseless tenor of their way. The speaker continues his praise of the simple life of common people. They are far from the madding crowd of city and political life. Madding here can mean either maddening, that is the source of madness or insanity, or it can mean mad, that is the crowd is itself hatefully insane. In either case, the common country people were removed from this insane world. As a result, they never strayed into the immoral acts of the powerful. Instead, they kept steadily to their simple but meaningful lives. They kept themselves away from the mean and sordid struggle for power and pelf, which maddens the ordinary people of the world. Their desires kept themselves confined within sober and virtuous limits. They continuously enjoyed a peaceful course of life in the quiet seclusion of their village. Stanza 20, line 77 to line 80. The text is like this: yet even these bones from insult to protect, some frail memorial still erected nigh, with uncouth rhymes and shapeless sculpture decked, implores the passing tribute of a sigh. The speaker then reminds us that these common people are in fact long dead. He notes that even if they were not powerful or great, and even if they did not have an elaborate memorial of the sort mentioned in line 38, they still deserve homage or tribute. At the very least, he suggests, an onlooker should sigh on seeing their graves. Note here the multiple meanings we can attach to the word passing. It can refer to the onlooker who is simply walking or passing by these graves. It can mean in passing, that someone seeing these graves should take just a moment out of their busy lives to remember the dead. And passing itself is a euphemism for death, another word used for death. In a way, then, Gray is suggesting that there is no difference between the person passing by the grave and the person who has passed away. Another reminder that all will eventually die. Though these peasants, simple village people, lived a simple and poor life in their secluded village, yet in order to prevent their graves from being trodden over and thus disillusioned and thus dishonored by the wayfarers, a very humble monument has been constructed on these graves. On it are inscribed clumsy verses which appeal to the passers-by for a sigh of grief and sympathy. We will stop here today and continue in the next session. Thank you.